Good morning. Tara, basa na tayo ng ating libro. Kapwa ka Filipino, magbasa tayo ng ating history. History of the Filipino People by Agoncillo and Guerrero. Today is 13 February 2023. History of the Filipino People Part 4, the American Period. Topic number 20 na tayo. Preparations for Independence. Nandito tayo sa paragraph, National Language. Basa. National language. In 1935, the delegates to the Constitutional Convention recognized the urgent need for a native national language. Quezon himself pointed out that a national language would bring about unity among the Filipinos and foster a better government. Accordingly, the delegates included a provision in the Constitution Article 2 which directed the National Assembly to take steps toward the development and adoption of a common language based on one of the existing native languages. The National Assembly on November 30, 1936 enacted Act No. 184 establishing the Institute of National Language, whose chief function was to make a study of the different Philippine languages for the purpose of evolving and adopting a common national language. The problem of national language needed a wise exercise of leadership on the part of President Quezon because of the possible regional disputes that might arise in the course of the Institute's attempts to evolve a national language. But the Filipinos recognized the problem as non-political and that government efforts to meet the goal were meant to improve the country's welfare. Quezon was sincerely interested in the solution of this problem so that the Commonwealth within half a decade after its inauguration succeeded in laying the foundations for the establishment of a Filipino national language. Contrary to the expectations of some Filipinos that it would take many years before solution could be reached. On November 9, 1937, after a serious and exhaustive study of the country's language situation, the Institute of National Language recommended to President Quezon the adoption of Tagalog as the basis of the national language. On December 30, Quezon proclaimed the language based on Tagalog as the country's national language. He also authorized in 1940 the printing of the dictionary and grammar prepared by the Institute and fixed June 19, 1940 as the day when the national language should begin to be taught in all schools in the Philippines. The National Assembly then enacted Act No. 570, which declared the Filipino national language to be one of the official languages, effective July 4, 1946. Popular government. Shortly before the presidential elections of 1935, Senator Juan Somolong deplored that to a great portion of the Filipino masses, which he called the unrepresented majority. Government had ceased to be meaningful. The needy classes, he pointed out, did not have representation in the political aggregations that wielded power in the government, while the majority and minority parties represented almost exclusively the intelligentsia and the Philippine plutocracy. It was therefore imperative, if the Commonwealth had any real concern for the welfare and dignity of the masses, that the government provide them greater opportunities for education and enlightenment, extend to them the right of suffrage, and at the same time allow them to participate actively in the workings of the government. It is also important that political parties represent all classes in Filipino society, that no one party should dominate the government if political power should be properly distributed. In 1925, an educational survey made under the supervision of Dr. Paul Monroe destroyed the myth that the masses of the Filipino people had had the advantages of popular education. A little more than 500,000 of the population had completed primary education. Only 160,000 had acquired intermediate instruction, and only 15,000 had completed high school education. The Monroe Commission pointed out that as much as 82% of the pupils who went to school failed to go beyond 4th grade. The study also found that the average Filipino child knew only 1/7 as much as the essential knowledge of life as an American child of the same age, thus implying that majority of the Filipino children of school age were growing to adulthood virtually illiterate. In 1933, only 34.96% of the children between the ages of 6 and 17 were actually in school. There was little improvement during the Commonwealth in this percentage, 41% in 1938 and 45% in 1939. The Bureau of Education reported that in 1938, only 5% of the 45% of the total Philippine school population actually progressed beyond the intermediate level of instruction. In 1938, the Director of Education reported that the regional surveys conducted by his bureau revealed one fundamental weakness of Filipino life: ignorance with its concomitants, poverty, and civic disintegration. Illiteracy is at the root of this weakness, which forms a serious drawback to Philippine culture and progress. To remove the cause requires the formulation and adoption of an education program which would raise the general intellectual level of the common tao. Ulitin ko guys, to remove the cause requires the formulation and adoption of an education program which would raise the general intellectual level of the common tao. Until this level is attained, all efforts of the Commonwealth government to improve the social and economic well-being of the masses will prove futile. It can only be inferred from this appalling information about the literacy situation that only a very small segment of the total Philippine population enjoy the right of suffrage, the most important participatory activity of any citizen in a democratic popular government. The Constitution of the Commonwealth granted the right of suffrage to male citizens not otherwise disqualified by law, who must be: number 1, 21 years old or older; number 2, able to read and write; and number 3, a resident in the Philippines for 1 year and in the municipality for 6 months. Wait. Yung number 3 guys, a resident in the Philippines for 1 year and in the municipality for 6 months prior to the election. The high literacy qualification for the Constitution served to deny the Filipino masses the right to choose leaders who would represent their own needs and demands in Philippine society. The National Assembly attempted to solve the literacy problem by enacting the Educational Decree of 1940, which provided that a child would be admitted into the public schools only on condition that he would remain in school until he had at least completed 4 years of primary education. The Act authorized the double single session, whereby 2 sets of pupils were taught each day in the hope that more children would be accommodated in the public schools. Earlier in September 1937, after a national plebiscite for women, okay ulit guys, Earlier in September 1937, after a national plebiscite for women showed that they were unanimously in favor of suffrage, the National Assembly passed a law granting women the right to vote and to hold political office. Even so, the extent of the people's participation in the government was negligible. So, nung araw pala guys, walang babaeng candidate for officials sa politics to. By June 1940, only 14% in the entire population constituted the electorate of the Philippines. The failure of the country's leadership to provide a balanced party system, the correct and maldistribution The failure of the country's leadership to provide a balanced party system and correct the maldistribution of power in the government further aggravated the plight of the unrepresented Filipino masses. So hanggang dito lang muna tayo. Bukas na tong unbalanced distribution of political power. So bukas, advance happy Valentine's na tayo dito. Valentine's na bukas Valentine's Day. So for February 14, 2023. Bye everyone. God bless.